What's going on, everybody? It's Skylar, and I'm here with Coach Dave Nedbalek of ORU Men's Basketball, and we're gonna go through a little interview. So
Glad to be here.
appreciate you being here. So just go and introduce yourself.
Yep, so I'm Dave Nedbalek here at Oral Roberts, and so I've been here. This is my fourth year with one gap in between. So I was here as a GA. I guess going all the way back to the beginning, I was a high school coach coming out of college. I got my first job when I was a sophomore. Played a season, got injured, came back home, got into coaching, and I went from volunteering at a high school where a buddy of mine's younger brother played at, to assistant coach, to head coach, to athletic director, all within a year. So it was a really cool opportunity for me, but it happened quickly. So I was a high school coach for 5 years. I was a Division III and Division II assistant for 5 years. I came to ORU as a graduate assistant. My first year was our Sweet 16 season. Did 2 years here, did a year at Louisiana Tech, and now I'm back going into my second year here.
Yeah, that's some kind of journey. That is some kind of journey. So my first question for you is, how do you define success? And that can be in any capacity. It doesn't need to just be your basketball coaching journey. Just how do you define success?
Yeah, I think it's really easy with questions like this. Like, there's a lot of cliches and things like that, you know, like trust the process, like the Sixers made really popular. I do think there's some validity to that, but honestly, like, the way I personally would define it is like I would center it around the word steward. Like, I always think about, you know, God's given me time, treasure, talents, and relationships, and like, it's my responsibility as a man to steward those gifts. And so trying to steward those time, treasure, talents, and relationships in a way that honors whatever you value. For me, obviously, faith is a really big part of my life. It's a big part of my family's life. It's one of the reasons why I was excited to come back to ORU. And so I think, you know, how do I empty the tank each day, honor my gifts? And, you know, to be honest, we have a 7-month-old son. Got to give my man Trey Ball a shout out. It's changed a lot for me. Like, before, I was much more work-centric and success looked very different. And now, you know, having a child changes some perspective, which this might not be super relevant for a lot of your channel being the younger GAs, but I think what it's done is it's given me a better perspective, which has probably helped me a lot. And honestly, one of the things that I thought about as I was prepping for this is, like, how do you block out the noise and really prioritize your energy and your efforts towards the things that you value most, right? There's so many inputs and social media and just people vying for our attention and people vying for telling us what matters and what does success look like. And, like, I always come back to the phrase in my head, I want to die empty of my best work. And so, to me, yes, we're in a competitive game where, like, the scoreboard tells us who wins and loses, but I do think there are victories in that. Like, did I give a perfect effort to empty my tank, the best that I can do? Did I learn from what went well? Did I lean into, or did I learn from what didn't go well? Did I lean into what went well? And then, like, just how do I keep stacking that day at a time? And I feel like eventually, you know, you're going to get to where you're trying to get to if you have that approach.
Oh, that's really good. And that actually goes into the next question a little bit. And the next question is, what are 2 pieces of advice you would give to people looking to get into the D1 coaching industry? And I also want to add a little part B to that question is, how can coaches looking to get into this industry apply the things that you just said? Because that's not easy. It's definitely something that also does come with experience, and you have a lot of experience in coaching, but how else can they kind of get a head start in that side?
Yeah, well, I've been asked this question in a myriad of different ways, and I definitely want to take the opportunity to shout out 2 people that I wouldn't be here without, and that would be Jamin Copeland, who's now the head coach at Ave Maria. Social media, do your thing, tag him, show him some love. And then Coach Deere was our assistant coach at UT Tyler at the time for me. and he's now the head coach at Columbia College in Columbia, South Carolina. Those two gave me my shot in college coaching. I was a Division III volunteer, working at UPS overnight to pay the bills and just trying to break in from being a high school coach. And Coach Deere, my first day on the job, texted me and said, meet me at IHOP 6 a.m. If you know Coach Deere, it's like that is a truly fitting time for a breakfast meeting. So I throw some water on my face. 6 a.m. I'm at IHOP, and Coach Deere gave me two pieces of advice that I've given to every GA, every manager, any young person in the business that I get the chance to speak to. I try to pour this into him. And the first thing he told me was, you are the way you view yourself, right? So I was a volunteer, and his word to me was like, if you view yourself as just a volunteer, that's what you'll be. But if you view yourself as, where you're trying to go, right? Like the mentality of like, dress for the job you want, not the job you have, then you'll perform to a different standard. And so like, to me, if I was in charge of laundry, like, hey, I'm the head coach of laundry, like, I want to kill it. I want to be the best in the country at doing laundry, setting out laundry, making sure our guys are ready to rock when practice comes around. If it's an alumni newsletter, he who's faithful with little will be faithful with a lot. Like, those guys gave me little tasks, and I just tried to crush them because of that advice. And so gradually you're getting more and more rope and more trust. And that kind of built into where I am today. So thinking back to that phrase, you are the way you view yourself, I think it's really important. Like, if you just view yourself as, oh, I'm just a manager, or, oh, I'm just a grad assistant, or, oh, I'm not making any money, or I'm not doing this or that, like, that will be how you show up. But if in your mind, like, this is a training ground for me to be the best head coach in the country, and you approach each day and you're just trying to wring it out of everything it has to offer, and like you're trying to soak up the experience and be a sponge, imagine how much more you'll take from that experience than someone who says, oh, I'm just a blank. And so I think that piece has been really important. And then the second piece he told me was, be selfish about your development. And I think the way I interpreted what that meant was, okay, if my responsibilities are A, B, and C, again, I'm doing those three to the best of my ability. I want to be the best in the country at these three tasks. And then when I'm done, I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to ask to get in the room. I'm going to ask to be in coaches' meetings. I'm going to be asked to be in scouting. I'm going to be asked to be involved in recruiting. And so with those guys, like, I would sit in the lobby of our office and I would listen to them make recruiting phone calls all day. And I'm just taking notes, like, okay, like, oh, that phrase is really good, or like, oh, I love his cadence of how he talks about this or that. And still to this day, I recruit the way I do from listening to Jake Deere on the phone calling recruits. And they had me call every Texas top 100 kid and try to invite them to campus, invite them to our elite camp. And so like Terrence Ferguson and Jared Vanderbilt and all these guys that are playing the NBA, I mean, I didn't know at the time, like, they're not coming to our elite camp, but like, I just got reps calling people and selling something that I was passionate about. And so those two pieces of advice have carried me far. You are the way you view yourself, and be selfish about your development. So to me, what that looks like for GAs and managers is like, sure, you have to crush your responsibilities. Like, if you're in charge of laundry, you can't go sit in on a recruiting meeting and not do the laundry, because you're going to lose that credibility. But take care of your tasks, have good time management, so that with that extra margin you create, now you can pop into a coach's office and say, hey, is there anything I can do to make your life easier today? Is there anything I can do to help with recruiting? Is there anything I can help to do with the scout for this weekend's game? Like, you just slowly start to learn, you start to build trust and build rapport, and you start to put deposits in with people, and that progresses the trust that they give you, and then you get bigger tasks, and now you're learning. And I think it all stems from those two pieces of advice, and I've really, really held on to that for, I guess we're going on year 16 now. I feel a little old. The grays are coming out.
No, that was a really good answer. I appreciate you putting thought into that. The next one I have is, if you could go back, what would you have done or started earlier to help you prepare not only to be successful at the Division I level, but also break through in the Division I level?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting, and I gave a lot of these interviews after we went to the Sweet 16. You know, everybody wants to talk then, but what's ironic to me at times is, like, I'm the same guy I was when I was a Division III volunteer. Sure, I've learned and had some experience and some opportunity to do some cool things, and I've been around great players. which, as we all know, players make plays. Like, the reality is most of us get what we earn by being around and finding better players. At the end of the day, it's the same game. Like, and you know this, like small college guys, when I went from high school to college, I was thinking like, oh, this is gonna be so great. Like, I'm not gonna have to teach and do all these things that I used to have to do. These guys are just gonna know what they're doing. They're gonna have a better skill set. They're gonna have more awareness defensively. And then I get to practice my first day at UT Tyler, and like, our best player doesn't know what the midline is. And I'm like, this is the same as my high school guys. They're just bigger. So I say all that to say, from Division III, from high school, whatever it is, all the way up to Division I, like, it's the same game. The same principles, the same underlying values carry over. Now, obviously, they get a little bigger and faster and stronger at each level. But I would just encourage guys, like, there's a great book by Frosty Westering, I think is his last name. Super hard to find a copy. I was blessed somebody sent me one. It's called Make the Big Time Where You Are. Like, when I was at UT Tyler, to me, you couldn't have convinced me that I was a volunteer. To me, it was like I was the head coach at Duke. Like, it was just, I loved it. I poured everything I had into it, and I think that kind of prepared me. But I think the other piece that I really would challenge people, and I learned this as a high school coach, is I would start the journey of learning how to lead people earlier. Like, I think there's a great misconception that this is a lot about basketball, and like, it really is about people. Like, when I was a high school coach, we went to the state tournament all 6 years I was there. I was really blessed to have some great players. Lost in the state tournament every year I was there. Still stings, but I mean, I studied everything I could offensively, from Bo Ryan's swing offense to flex to dribble drive, like everything in under the sun. I got my hands on. I threw it in my fast draw library. You know, I'm watching hours and hours of all these clinics and trying to learn what the best people do, because I thought, okay, if this is a basketball thing, I've got to be great at something. And my players hated my guts. And I mean, I've redeemed, I think, that relationship with them now, and they wouldn't say they hated my guts, but they hated how I made them feel. And I coached the way I was coached, and I was just like thumb down all the time, and I was just on them, and nothing was ever good enough. And the goal is to win, right? And I didn't feel satisfied. We were winning, and my locker room hated me. And so I learned really quickly, like, this is a people business. And like, I will tell you, and this is true vulnerability for me, all the times in my life where I look back in reflection and like I have regret or I have a misstep where I'm like, dang, I did not choose the right response there, is always tied to a time when I stopped prioritizing people. Like, that is my number one thing I would challenge anyone, wherever you're at, manager to head coach, like, prioritize and serve people. The basketball stuff, it is a huge component of what we do, but like, it's a small piece. And if we don't get the people thing right, the basketball thing rarely will take care of itself. And that's very countercultural, to be honest. Like, you know, there's a lot of people that would argue, like, you know, bad players with great culture, like, that's going to struggle on the scoreboard. But this goes back to the very first thing you asked me, of like, how do I define success? At the end of the day, I want to put my head down on the pillow and know that I poured out my best to serve and love the people that God's put in my life. And so for me, I would challenge, prioritize people as best you can. And I would also just say, like, be true to who you are. Like, to me, it's ironic. If we went to Walmart right now and walked around, you're going to see 500 probably odd personalities, but they're all going to be unique. And then we get in coaching, and it's like we all have this cookie cutter, look the same, act the same, dress the same, move the same. And it's like, man, we got to be us. Like, God's wired us all differently. He's gifted us all differently. Like, don't conform yourself down to like what you think the model is supposed to be. And so that's what I would challenge. Prioritize people, and then, man, be true to who you are.
Great answer. And my last question for you are, what are some common mistakes you see aspiring coaches make, and how do you think they can avoid them?
Yeah, I probably had my most notes on this question, because I think it's really good. Like, our church here in Tulsa has an anthem that they use where they say, like, we give our best to the next generation, right? So like, if I'm doing my job, you're able to stand on my shoulders and learn from my failures, be equipped by my success, right? Like that's what good team and good mentorship looks like, is you don't have to step in some of the same potholes that I did. But I would say right now for young people especially, like there is more than ever, it feels like, a pressure to be seen rather than to like actually be. Like I think about, there's a quote in 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, which is a unbelievable read. I probably hit it like every 2 years and reread it just because it's that dense. But like there's a quote in there where they says, for every 1,000 hacking at the leaves of behavior, 1 hacks at the root of character. And like I chew on that a lot. With social media and with, again, all the platform that we have, even like this is a great example of utilizing a platform for good, but like, you know, there are millions of videos on YouTube. There's millions of things on Twitter. Like we can project an image of being something that we don't actually have the substance to be. And so I would challenge people, like, spend time developing and working like the inner working on you. I think that's huge. The next thing I would say that I think is a really hard transition, especially for young people, is the transition from like player or player age to coaching roles, right? The second you go past being a player or even a student manager, you're really an extension of the staff, and you are a part of the staff. Like, I think anybody that can influence your team in one direction or the other is somebody that deserves to be not only held accountable, but also poured into. Like, I think it's really important to define that line between, yes, you can trust me, there's like this mentor-mentee role, but like we're not buddy-buddy. Because players are gonna want to vent to you guys, right? It's just, it's natural. Y'all are closer to their age. It makes more sense for them to have those conversations in the locker room. They're gonna be different than the conversations they would have with us. And I think some guys really struggle to, how do you transition into being able to speak truth into their lives, right? And I know for me personally, like, I probably have 1,000 emails in my inbox right now of people who just need a chance, right? They're good enough to be on our team, right? They just never got their shot and they need a shot. And, you know, some of these guys, I watch their film and I'm like, it's kind of crazy to me that you emailed a Division I staff and thought this was the level. And again, I'm not into dream crushing, but I do think there's a level of truth telling that has to take place. And there are less truth tellers, I really believe there are less truth tellers in people's lives now than there ever have been before. Like, these guys are just gaslighters that just want to pump kids up and tell them how good they are. And while that's great, like, again, I believe in speaking life into people, I believe in instilling confidence. I'm literally a walking example of making a decision like, hey, I want to be a college basketball coach, and like grinding it out. Like we've talked about this, working overnight, sleeping 3 hours a night so I can make it happen. Like, I'm all for go chase your dream, get after it and make it happen. But I also think people need to aggressively hunt out people that will look them in the eyes and tell them the truth. That to me is love. And so we have an opportunity with our players to not be someone that just blows smoke, but somebody that is able to look at someone and say, like, no, to be honest, man, like you're in the wrong here, right? Or like, that thinking is wrong. Or, hey, like, you're probably a little bit too zoomed in right now on how you feel. Let's zoom out and think about, like, how does this affect the team? And so I think that transition is really hard. And then the last thing I would say, this is kind of, to be honest, I've felt this more this year than I ever have before. But you guys, y'all's generation, like, y'all are smart, man. Like, some of the stuff y'all do, like social media and AI and chat GPT, all these things I watch on, I'm like, holy cow, like, I feel like the dinosaur now. So I would just say, like, be a master in the areas that are getting farther and farther away from our coaches' world of reality. Like, some of these guys don't understand anything. You say chat GPT to them and they're like, what is it?
Yeah.
So like, I would say be an expert in those areas. I always used to joke, like, I had a job with Jamin because I would turn on his computer, but like, I wouldn't teach him how to do it, right? Like, if it plugs in or turns on is my job. That's usually how I would describe it. And like, he wasn't quite that bad with technology, but like, it kept me a job because it was an area that I was good at. Young people are better with technology. I mean, this is the greatest technological age in the history of the world. So like, excel in those areas and find ways to add value with your staff through them. I think that's a really important piece because the technology curve right now is crazy. And it's getting farther and farther away from what a lot of our head coaches understand or what they use on a day-to-day basis. And I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush. Not all head coaches are bad with technology, but it is a different time. So be a star in those areas.
Yeah. I appreciate you taking the time to take this interview with me. Coach Dave Nedbalek, Oral Roberts Men's Basketball. Appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you.
Stay tuned for the next one. Thank you.